Hey guys, welcome to the Better Man podcast. Today I am joined by Dr. Judson Brandeis there's a lot of stuff that he does. He's the author of the 21st Century Man book. He is also an expert in men's sexual medicine. And today we're going to be asking questions that you would want to ask a men's sexual wellness expert. So, yeah, welcome to the show, Dr. Brandeis.
Hey,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Dean, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So we've actually gone back and forth a few years now. You reached out to me, gosh, it must have been in 2019 or 2020 when you were working on the 21st Century Man book, and asked me to be a contributor. And I remember writing about that, getting a nice little, I think it was a 5 or 6 page intro, but we have not actually had a one-on-one conversation. So this is the one of the first times we're actually chatting face to face.
Yeah, the first, but hopefully not the last.
Yeah, I hope so. So, I kind of just wrote down a bunch of questions that I'm personally curious about. I also wanted to write down some questions that I think guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s who are, starting to realize that they're not as young as they used to be anymore. And they might notice that their bodies aren't doing, all the things they used to do anymore. So I wanted to ask some questions that kind of focused on that. But to pique everybody's interest, let's just start this off by asking, what goes into sexual well-being? And I can tell you that for me, my assumption with a lot of things in general is that if you just exercise, if you eat well, if you sleep well, you manage your stress, you live just a healthy, both physically and emotionally lifestyle, that a lot of these things will just fall into place. But I'm kind of curious what does go into sexual well-being in your expertise. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important, and that is sexuality. It's a function of circulation, but it's a function of a lot of other things. So I kind of have this vision of a Maslow's pyramid of midlife men. And at the very beginning is your physical being. So, you have to make sure that you're an ideal weight, that you build muscle, that you do some cardiovascular fitness, that you stretch or do yoga every morning, and that you take care of your physical needs in terms of making sure you're not diabetic or you don't have cancers or et cetera, et cetera. So go to your primary care physician and take care of yourself in that way. And then there's also mental health. So things like depression and anxiety really take down erectile function in a very significant way. And then there's emotional health. And then there's spiritual health. And then very, very important is relationship health, right? So you could have everything, but if you don't have a good relationship with your partner or your spouse, you're not going to be physically intimate. And then once you've achieved all those things, then you're sort of at the top of the pyramid. And the top of the pyramid is intimate health and sexual health.
Got it. So, I just had a conversation for a podcast last week, and we talked about men and testosterone and how men have less testosterone than they did decades ago. And I'm curious, is that true? Is that something that you found? Is testosterone something that we should really be paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most large studies show that testosterone has decreased about 30% over the past 50 or 60 years. And it's a combination of multiple things, including the foods that we eat. But think about it this way, right? Your body is really smart. Your body will only make what it needs. So if you're a hunter, a caveman hunter out on the plains taking down wild buffalo, you need a lot of testosterone in order to survive,
Hmm.
right? If you're a farmer growing crops, it's still hard work, but your level of testosterone doesn't have to be quite as high. If you're sitting behind a computer in front of a desk all day, your body says, well, I don't need that much testosterone to succeed at what I'm doing. I'm going to use that energy to do other stuff, right?
Mm.
Store fat, so on and so forth. And that's the other thing, is that testosterone and estrogen are almost identical molecules, right? So we're all taught men are from Mars and women are from Venus, but the difference between A testosterone molecule and an estrogen molecule is only one hydrogen atom. So it's easy for your body to flip testosterone into estrogen, and a lot of that takes place in adipose or fatty tissue. So the fact that almost half of men are obese means that there's a lot of estrogen floating around instead of a lot of testosterone.
And when that happens, what does that do to your health, or what does that do to your body?
Yeah, I mean, testosterone is an amazing hormone, right? So think about it. When you're 12 years old, you're like this little scrawny kid. And by the time you're 18, you've grown a foot, you put on muscle, you shed fat, your penis grows, you put on pubic hair, your voice gets deeper, you have libido, you have motivation, you have drive. And that's almost entirely due to a change in the level of testosterone. It goes from like 200 up to 1,000, right? So then after you 20 years old, it kind of peaks out, and on average, it declines about 1 or 2% per year. So as you decline in testosterone, your motivation declines, your libido declines. It's much harder to build muscle. It's much more difficult to get rid of fat. Testosterone also is heart healthy. It also prevents diabetes. I mean, it's amazing the number of things that testosterone does that we're continuing to find out. Even, a lot of people in the past said, well, testosterone causes prostate cancer. It's actually the opposite we found. So men with low testosterone have a much higher incidence of prostate cancer than men with a normal or elevated testosterone.
So I was kind of thinking before when you were talking about how men needed higher testosterone if they were hunting buffalo on a daily basis or whatever it would be that, is highly physical like that. Could you have too much testosterone? Is that a thing or?
Yeah, the thing is, there's this like, it's not an urban myth, but of like a roid rage, right? So guys that are like, when I do testosterone to place in my office, I tend to shoot for a number that's a lot higher than most doctors would shoot for. And that's because I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've seen the benefits accrue at different levels. And a lot of guys will say, well, am I going to go to a bar and beat somebody up? Okay. So let me just sort of get you through that. So when you're 20, your testosterone should be roughly around 1,000, right? Now, if you're a professional athlete, a football player, or whatever, and you want to get an advantage over other men whose testosterones are 1,000 and who are going to the gym and exercising, et cetera, your testosterone's got to be 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000, right? Those are the guys that go into a bar and beat someone up because they're in a roid rage. Like my 60, 70-year-old accountants that come in with a testosterone of 250 and I get them up to 1,000 or 1,100 or 1,200, they're not beating somebody up at the golf club. They're hitting the ball really far and they're feeling great. And, they're trying to be sexually active with their wife, but, they're not in a roid rage. So, as long as testosterone is done properly, it's super safe and super beneficial.
Got it. I'm glad you touched on levels because I was going to ask that. Next. So 1,000, that's like an average if you're in your 20s. What about if you're in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s? And what is the average? And then what should you be striving for?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So when you get your testosterone reports back, it'll list an average of like, or the acceptable range of like 300 to 900. I mean, that's a super large range. And then there's sort of expectations based on age. So, in reality, when you're 20, most guys are around 900. And when you hit 80, you're around 250, 300, and it goes down in a fairly linear pattern. So as opposed to menopause, where in your 50s, you basically just drop off totally because your ovaries fail, your testicles kind of slowly decline over time. So, if you're in your 50s, maybe mid 500s, 600, And then if you're in your 60s or 70s, maybe 400s, so on and so forth. But the question is, the other question you asked is, what is really an appropriate level, right? And so there's two aspects to that. One is, what is the actual level? And then the second is, what are your clinical symptoms? So if your level's 200, but you feel great and you're doing everything you want to do in your life, I wouldn't touch testosterone. And if you're 400 or 500 and you feel like crap and your energy is low and your muscles are wasting, you're putting on weight and your libido's crap, testosterone's going to be like literally a miracle drug for you. And it's not really a drug, it's a hormone, right? So any guy with a bat and two balls, when you get their testosterone up to 1,000 or 1,200, it's going to feel great. We know what, for 100% of men, what the effects of testosterone are.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that. So if let's say that we go in or we go to your clinic and you say, you know what, I'm a little concerned about your testosterone. What are some lifestyle changes that guys can do? Or, I would assume that we should look at lifestyle before we jump straight to, okay, we're going to do testosterone therapy. And what should some things that guys look at if they have low testosterone?
My recipe for elevation of testosterone, better physical health, better mental health, better emotional health is pretty simple. Don't drink alcohol, don't smoke, don't eat too much food, don't do drugs, exercise every day, stretch or do yoga every morning, do a little meditation every morning, get at least 7 or 8 hours of sleep, and be nice to other people. And if you do that, your testosterone will go up and everything else in life will pretty much come around for you.
So do you also go into, I'll just be honest. So like, I think it's really easy to say that to people. It's so much harder to do it. So what are some, so for me, like whenever, I'm trying to help people with lifestyle change, I say, look, you're going to have limited motivation. You're going to have limited energy. You can't do everything at once. You're going to have to pick something and start small. I also recommend a couple books in particular. So I always talk about Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg and Atomic Habits by James Clear. Those are, and if we want to throw in a third, then I would say The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. These are 3 books that are fantastic for helping you understand psychology behind behavior change and actually making these changes. So, what are some things that, what are some resources, maybe some mindsets, or what would you tell people, giving them advice in terms of, hey, these are things that you should do. How do we go about doing this practically?
Yeah. So I agree with you 100%. That's super easy to say all those things. And we live in a stressful world, and there are a lot of people with coping mechanisms, and, we all carry baggage and skeletons in the closet. And so, it's hard to live that kind of life. What I find that men really respond well to are numbers, right? So for example, I don't feel like alcohol benefits people in any way, right? I mean, I used to drink back in the day, but about for the past 10 years, my wife and I both stopped drinking alcohol. And a lot of my guys come into the office, and one thing we do right away is a body composition scan, right? So I know what people's percentage of body fat is, what their basal metabolic rate is, what their left arm, what their right arm, their trunk, their left leg, their right leg, how much muscle you have. So I can give someone a clear picture of what the insides of them look like, right? And when someone comes in and it says, you're 35 pounds overweight, I ask them, what is it like carrying around a 35-pound backpack all day? Are you tired at the end of the day? Do your knees hurt? Do your ankles hurt? Do your feet hurt? And, people say, yeah, that is. Okay. Do you want to lose that weight? Yes. Okay. Do you want me to explain how to lose that weight? And I go through, high protein, low carb diet. I'm trying to make it very simple, but really numbers based. I have them track calories with a simple internet app. And then the other thing that I do is I say, okay, now how much do you drink? Well, I have 2 drinks a day. Say, okay, take out your calculator.
Mm-hmm.
Do you drink wine? Yeah, I drink wine. Okay, it's 120. I go to the internet, 125 calories for a glass of red wine. Okay, you multiply that times 2, multiply that times 365, divide that by 3,500, which is the number of calories per pound of fat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's the number you get? 28. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, it means that you're taking in 28 pounds of fat per year in alcohol.
Mm.
And alcohol is 3 things. It's a depressant, so it affects your mood. It disinhibits you, right? So most of the dumb things we've all done in life have been done under the influence of alcohol, and everyone shakes their head, yes. And it's empty calories. So it's just basically calories that you're burning or turning into fat.
Mm.
And so when you put it that way, people are like, well, okay, I could probably cut down to 1 drink a day, or maybe I should, for the next 6 months or a year, I'll stop drinking. At the end of the year, I'll see how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I don't tell someone not to drink.
Mm-hmm.
I just let the numbers and the logic of what they're doing
Yeah.
speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And, when somebody comes to that conclusion on their own based on the numbers that you're presenting to them, I think that's much more powerful than me telling them, listen, you have to stop drinking alcohol, because they'd be like, well, screw you.
Yeah.
I like my, but the other thing that I ask them, I look them in the eye and I say, why do you drink?
Mm.
Because most people, it's just habitual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you watch TV commercials and guys are at the game and they're drinking beer, and they're at a party and they're with their wives and they're drinking
Mm-hmm.
wine, or they're out with their buddies drinking bourbon. But when you actually think about it, why do you drink? If you're addicted, that's a whole different story. Go find an addiction specialist. If
Mm-hmm.
it's a habit, find another habit. I mean, I started drinking Diet Coke, which may not be better than alcohol, but it was a good transition. And if you really genuinely like alcohol, like, I know sugar's bad for me, so, but I genuinely like ice cream, so I just understand, okay, I'm doing this because I really like it,
Mm-hmm.
not because. But most people, I don't think, genuinely like alcohol. I mean, I like beer with sushi, so I drink a non-alcoholic beer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know for me, I have my treat is mineral water. So like I have
Wow.
a
Go nuts.
I know, right? Yeah,
Wow.
I'm really fun. But yeah,
My
I have
body
like
is a temple.
yeah, I mean, but it's kind of it's the same habit kind of, right? It's the sound of
Yeah.
the carbonation coming out as you take the cap off, and it's like sitting down and then having that sip and feeling the carbonation. It's very similar to, having a beer. And I used to drink a lot when I was younger, to the point that I probably should not have. But now and then I stopped drinking. My wife and I have been dating for a few years. A few years ago, this is probably like 2015, and we realized, like, why are we going out? Like, we go out, we drink, and then we just come back home together. Why don't we skip all of that? So we did that, and we stopped drinking, as much as we were. She lost a bunch of weight. I started sleeping better and appreciating the mornings. And then and then I developed a new relationship with alcohol, where I had some and I was like, oh, my head hurts. Like, oh, this sucks. So, anyways, that was my experience. But I also want to ask you, you mentioned that you stopped drinking alcohol 10 years ago. What were, if you feel comfortable with it, what were your motivations?
Yeah. I mean, my wife and I have 4 kids.
Mm-hmm.
3 of them are teenagers now. One's 20.
Yeah,
And
I can see him.
yeah,
See him right behind
there
me.
you go. So, I mean, when I grew up in New York, it was like, I was born in 67, and you could take your pencil and turn the 7 into a 3 and then hand it to the bouncer at the front of the bar and walk in, right? So it was, I mean, it's super simple. Or you go to the dairy barn and get a 12-pack of beer.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's much, much more difficult, because thank God that they've cracked down on that. So, we were asking our kids and our kids' friends, like, well, where do people get alcohol? And they're like, oh, well, they just get it from their parents' liquor cabinet.
Mm.
And so my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, you know what? We're just not going to have a liquor cabinet.
Mm.
And so that was, you know, I mean, we would drink maybe a glass and a half of wine a day,
Mm-hmm.
just at the end of the day to kind of release the stress of the day. But
Mm-hmm.
it actually wasn't that hard to get rid of it. It was just, it was a habit. And when we replaced the habit with something else,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, I felt much more productive, much more energy, um, slept better.
Mm-hmm.
I just, people just don't understand how damaging even a small amount of alcohol is.
Yeah. You know, something that alcohol does do, not that I'm condoning it, but one reason why I think some people do it is because it does open you up emotionally. So like there's a lot of things that you wouldn't do, and then you have some alcohol and you feel the inhibitions come down to the point that you can be, you can let yourself be a little bit more of the you that you're maybe repressing. So I'm just curious for you,
For
did
better or for worse.
for better or for worse, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, 50% of motor vehicle deaths are related to drunk driving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most of domestic abuse is related to alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I sort of agree in some respects. It opens you up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a shy guy and you're drinking at a bar, you're more likely to go up to that girl that you've been looking at for a long time. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I don't know necessarily that the benefits outweigh
Mm-hmm.
the
Well,
downsides.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that people have an outlet for their emotions when they drink, and then if they aren't drinking, those emotions maybe they don't come out. Maybe they come out in other ways. I'm not saying that drinking alcohol and being emotional is healthy. But I am
Yeah.
saying that those emotions and that openness actually does come out. And then when you stop drinking, you either have to find another way for these emotions to come out, or a lot of people just start drinking caffeine more instead because
Hmm.
you know, well, you'd rather have like an energetic guy than a violent guy, I guess.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, you know, you wrote an amazing chapter in the book on mindfulness. And I think
thank you.
that's what it comes down to a lot of time is just sort of understanding, like, why am I doing the things that I'm doing?
Hmm.
And if, you know, if you're going out to the bar and having a little bit of alcohol so that you're a little bit less inhibited so that you can open up your personality a little bit more, then just understand that that's what you're doing.
Hmm.
And if you're doing it to release stress or to hide your sorrow, or
Hmm.
you know, because you're mad at the world, then that's a whole different dynamic. And it's just sort of being mindful of what's going on behind your actions.
Hmm.
You know, if you're eating too much, why, you know, I mean, ultimately, one of the greatest things that we control is what goes into our mouth,
Hmm.
right? So if you're eating way too much or you're eating the wrong foods, why are you doing that? You know,
Hmm.
what's, are you bored? Are you upset? Are you, you know, mad at yourself? Or are you eating sugar to kind of give yourself a lift? I mean, just if you're going to be honest with someone, be honest with yourself and figure out why you're doing the things that you're doing. And that way, those, you know, 9 things that I rattled off,
Hmm.
um, you know, you begin to be able to get more on that path. I mean, I tell my patients every morning, wake up before anyone else in the house and do 15-20 minutes of stretching or yoga,
Hmm.
because that gets the blood flowing. It gets your mind centered. I mean, you kind of need those things.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
uh, so we talked about testosterone, but I'm kind of curious about what are some other tests that men should be regularly getting from their doctor?
Well, you know, so it's interesting. Before I put anyone on testosterone, there are a lot of things that we need to rule out,
Hmm.
right? So if you have a low thyroid level, yeah, it's really important to replace the thyroid before you start giving someone testosterone. If you have sleep apnea,
What does
right?
that?
A lot of men.
What does thyroid mean?
Thyroid is it's a hormone that regulates your metabolism,
Hmm.
right? So if your metabolism is high, then your sort of body temperature is a little bit higher, and you metabolize energy and food and things a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And if your metabolism is low, then you're much more likely to put on fat, and your engine basically is running a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
Your body temperature is a little bit colder, and you tend to be more sluggish.
Mm. Okay. Okay, I interrupted. Continue.
Oh yeah. So I mean, you got to make sure when somebody's sleeping okay, you have to make sure that their thyroid is okay. You have to make sure that their diet is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that their mental state, they're not depressed, et cetera, et cetera. And so then if you clear out all that stuff, then I would put someone on testosterone. But I do, basically a full panel of labs to check up on someone's kidneys, to
Mm-hmm.
check up on their liver, to check their what's called the CBC, so your red blood cells, your white blood cells,
Mm-hmm.
your platelets, vitamin D levels, right? Because it's important for bone health, B12, which is important for nerve health and for energy. Then we check a PSA, which is a prostate cancer screening test.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of these things are also in the book because a lot of men don't go to their primary care physician, right?
Mm-hmm.
So men are 50% less likely to go to a doctor than women,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Do you think that's because of lack of health insurance, or is that because they think they're too busy, or what?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of stuff. I think women are more keyed in to health insurance
Mm-hmm.
because one, a lot of times they'll take kids to the pediatrician, so they actually even know where their health insurance card is. Most guys don't even know where their card is. Second of all, it's true.
It's true.
Second
Yeah.
of all, they have babies, so they're keyed into at least one doctor,
Mm-hmm.
a gynecologist. And so if they need to go to a doctor for anything, they know the name of a doctor. A lot of guys before the age of 40 or 50, they don't even know the name of their doctor. Or, like I'm blessed to be in the Bay Area. So we have guys from Facebook, Apple, Google, Lawrence Livermore Lab. So I was sitting with this guy who's a physics PhD at Lawrence Livermore Lab, which, makes all of our nuclear bombs and stuff like that. And I said, well, do you have an HMO or a PPO? And he looked at me like I was, like I was talking about something on a different planet.
Yeah.
This guy's got like a PhD from Stanford, a PhD from MIT,
Yeah.
and a PhD from Cal, right? He's like a physics, chemistry, and nuclear triple PhD, but he doesn't know whether he has an HMO or a PPO, right? That's and there's an amazing chapter on what you need to understand about health insurance in the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the other thing is that we live in a world of health insurance, and the economics of healthcare are so messed up in this country that
Mm-hmm.
on average, you get 15 to 16 minutes with the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
right? For the doctor, for the whole thing, the doctor's got to do everything he's got to do with you or she's got to do with you in 15 or 16 minutes, right? So if you come in and talk about your pet cat and the weather and football, no, seriously, and then you don't provide the doctor with much information. By the time the doctor figures out what is wrong with you, they're going to be checking their watch because it's time for the next patient. So in the book, and then also on the 21st Century Man website, I have a whole thing on how to prepare to go to the doctor. And in a nutshell, it's write down your health history, right? What medical problems you have, what surgeries you've had, do you drink, do you smoke?
Mm-hmm.
Write down a list of every medication you're on and some of the medications you've tried in the past but didn't work or you had side effects from. Then write down every imaging study you've had, right? If you're coming in for a back problem and you've had MRIs in the past or x-rays in the past, write them all down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then write down your history of present illness. What are you here for? How long has it been a problem? Write down as much detail as you possibly can, and then write down a list of questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you want your questions answered, write them down.
Yeah.
Right. And then hand that to the doctor at the beginning of the visit, or even send it in beforehand. And the doctor will have a big smile. I have a dictaphone, so I just, voice dictation system. I dictate everything into the computer in about 3 or 4 minutes. And then you got me
Mm-hmm.
for 13 or 14 minutes. Because the thing is, you have to understand it from the doctor's perspective, right? Medicare hasn't given us a raise in about 20 or 25 years. but the cost of medical inflation has gone up about 3 or 4% per year. So, physicians' jobs, we've been getting a pay cut about 3 or 4% per year.
Hmm.
And so in response to that, you have to jam more patients into your office.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you have less time with patients.
Hmm.
And so if you figure out how to make the most of the time with your doctor, you're much more likely to walk out of that visit, satisfied
Mm-hmm.
than being happy that your doctor knows the name of your pet cat.
Yeah. I'm laughing. I was laughing initially because so my wife's a physical therapist, and she's doing a lot of work from home right now, as many have for the past few years. And sometimes she'll come up to me after a call and say, like, that person talked about, we didn't even talk about their injury. We just talked about random stuff for 30 minutes, and then I had 5 minutes, and then I had to go. And so
Yeah, like I'm not your friend. I'm your doctor.
yeah.
I'm here. I mean, I have a different practice now. I have a private pay practice because I think when to really deal with sexual medicine issues, you have to have a much more holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of my initial patient visits are about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But
Got it.
for 20 years, I was in the insurance-based world, and that's what you had to do.
Yeah. Um, I dropped my pen and I forgot what I was going to ask. Oh, I was going to say, so there is, guys, if you do have health insurance, a lot of those tests that for me, for example, I've always had historically low vitamin D levels. I don't know why. I live in Austin. I'm outside like an hour and a half a day. But I'm on the very bottom of the what is an acceptable range of vitamin D. I'm going to blame it on growing up in Cleveland and my body just not learning how to absorb sunlight. But I've always had low vitamin D, so that's something that I try to continue to get checked. But this is something that can be covered by health insurance, even though it is sold privately. It could be $200-$300 for one of these tests. But if you do have health insurance, um, you know, that's my
Well, and
insider knowledge.
I mean, if bone density really is an issue, like if you have chronically low vitamin D for whatever reason, then you get a bone density scan. Then if the bone density is low and you try vitamin D and calcium and that doesn't work, there are a lot of other medications
Mm.
that you can take to improve bone density. But the thing is, you don't know it. I mean, the issue is, right, that in your 20s and 30s, you're healthy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Life hasn't really caught up to you. Like, take a car, right? You can drive the heck out of a new car and there won't be a problem. But, maybe by 40,000 miles, that car is going to start breaking down. But if you take care of a car
Mm.
at 100 or 150 or 200,000 miles, that car's still going strong. And, your body is really not much different.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't take care of it, the thing is, like, when you're 30 and you're not taking care of yourself, your 60-year-old self is going to be like, how come my 30-year-old self didn't take care of me?
Mm.
Because now, I'm fat, I'm weak, I have diabetes, I have liver failure because I drank too much, I have lung cancer because I smoked,
Mm.
right? So in your 20s and 30s, you can get away with it, but in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, you can't get away with it. And
Mm-hmm.
what you did to yourself back in the day is going to catch up with you.
Mm. So, what do men need to be on the lookout for as they get into their 40s and 50s?
Well, so I mean, it's a really interesting study I just read out of a lab at Tufts, which looked at genetic expression uh, after exercising. And they took a group of 20-year-olds and a group of 50-year-olds, and they ran them through the same exercises day after day after day. And they did muscle biopsies at the beginning and muscle biopsies at the end. And what they found was that the genetic expression in the 20-year-olds was 3 times what it was in the 50-year-olds, which basically means that the 20-year-olds were building 3 times more muscle
Wow.
with the same workout routine as 50-year-olds, right?
Wow.
And we were all 20 at one point, right? So don't complain if you're 50 and you can't build muscle like your 20-year-old son, but that's just reality. Or if you look at, everyone that comes in that's, aging, I show them the graph of the world record for the 100-yard freestyle in swimming and the 100-yard dash in running. And from 20 to 60, the numbers are pretty flat. But after 60, the times start to decline pretty significantly. And after 80, the decline is really dramatic, right? Because, like Jim Morrison said, no one gets out of here alive, right? So we lose muscle. So you have to understand that that's going to happen. And you have to begin to understand how to compensate for that. So, I'm 55. I know that in 5 years, I'm going to be on the downslope. There's really nothing that I can do about it. I can replace my testosterone. I can eat a lot of protein. I can take a nitric oxide booster like a Firm. I can take creatine. I can take NMN or NR, nuclear vitamin B3. I can take what's the other one I just started taking? You can take the proper supplements. You can get the right amount of sleep. So there are a lot of things that you can really do to live as good and as clean and as healthy a life as you possibly can. But you got to know that at some point you're going to decline.
Yeah.
And so you want to maximize your health span as opposed to just maximizing your lifespan.
So a lot of it is being anticipatory of just realities that come with getting older and doing things to address that. So you want to get out of things ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great chapters in the 21st Century Man, written by Malcolm Johnson, who's a friend of mine and is an emergency room physician, is stupid things that men do to find themselves in the emergency room. Right? I've done accidental death. Yeah, I mean, accidental death is number 3 after heart disease and cancer. Right? And so, sadly, I don't single track mountain bike or snowboard anymore because I have, some lower back congenital issues. And one time I found myself a couple of years ago needing an epidural and in severe, unrelenting nerve-related back pain. And I just decided I can never do that again.
Wow.
But, simple things like 90% of eye injuries are preventable by using eye protection. Right. So do you want to be that guy out in the backyard with a Sawzall cutting something up and having a little sliver of metal lodge into your eyeball and lose vision in one eye? Right. Because it happens an enormous number of times in the United States. Just when you look at statistics, you realize stuff happens to people. Or 50% of hand injuries are preventable by using gloves.
Wow.
Right. Or almost all ladder related issues are preventable. Every year, thousands and thousands of middle-aged guys fall off roofs or fall off ladders and break their hips, break their backs, become disabled, right? And the reason for that is you're not as strong muscularly, your vision isn't as good, your balance isn't as good, your reflexes aren't as good, your tendons and ligaments aren't as flexible as they used to be, and sometimes your judgment isn't as good, right? And so the stuff that you were able to do when you're 20 or 30, you can't do anymore, but you don't really either realize that or accept it. And so you end up with a life-altering injury when all you had to do is flip the kid next door $20 and he would put the lights up for you. Is it really worth saving $20 to prove how manly you are that you can put stuff up, put the Christmas lights up?
Well, that's what it is. We want to try and prove to ourselves that we can still do it.
Right.
So. But,
when you're in a full body cast,
yeah,
it's hard to prove stuff.
Right. Good for you. You really showed us at that point. So I have 2 questions that came up. So how important is muscle to all of this?
Oh man, muscle's just the key to everything for me.
Wow.
Right. I mean, it's all about, I don't talk about weight in my office. I talk about the muscle to fat ratio, right? You want to build muscle and burn fat. In fact,
what's the ideal ratio?
That's a great question. So, in our body composition scan, they have percentages of what you should be. And so, to be honest, I'm not sure what those are based on. But, I try to get my patients over 100% on, all the metrics. You can go up to, like, I have 49er players that are at 150%.
Mm.
So for when you're looking at percentage of body fat, for men, it's between 10 and 20% that you want to be. For women, it's between 18 and 28% that you want to be. Women have to carry more fat because, they have babies.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what they call sort of ideal is about 15% body fat.
Okay. So I'll just say that I was sitting below that for a really long time, and I thought I was super badass because I was like, "Look at me, I'm 6% body fat." Um, and then like I went somewhere, had that assessed, and they're like, "Yeah, you probably have low sex drive. You're probably there's just all these negative things that go with." So I just wanted to say that because I think a lot of people think, "Wow, you're not as like cut as you used to be." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm healthier now."
Well, the thing is, people don't think about what the purpose of fat is,
Mm,
right? In life, fat is bad, right? But what's the purpose of fat? Fat is survival,
mm-hmm,
right? So the sun shines on trees. Trees take carbon dioxide and water and make this thing called glucose or sugar, right? Which is a storage form of energy. And then when you take in a lot of sugar, then and you turn it into starch, and when you have enough starch, enough energy, then you turn it into fat. Because like, I'm looking out the window right now, and there are squirrels running up and down trees.
mm-hmm,
And why are they running up and down trees? They're running up and down trees because pretty soon all the nuts are going to fall off the trees,
mm-hmm,
and they're not going to have food. And it really depends on how fat they are, whether they're going to survive the winter.
mm-hmm,
Or, one of my favorite TV shows is Naked and Afraid,
mm-hmm.
right? Take a hot guy and a hot girl, take their clothes off, throw them into the jungle in Belize, come back 21 days later and see if they survive. And they all lose about 20 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they don't get meals,
Right.
right? They have to kill their food, or they have to find their food. And so fat is like gold.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a world where you can go to Uber Eats, in 20 minutes, you can get a 2,000 calorie burrito.
Mm-hmm.
And so fat is sort of bad, but you have to understand the reason people put on fat is because we've evolved as animals. Evolution doesn't take place that quickly. And so our bodies, anytime they see extra calories, are going to store them as fat.
Mm-hmm. So we have a
And so
biological
that's
drive to add fat.
exactly. And if you put one of those big bodybuilders with 2% body fat on Naked and Afraid, they would fail miserably because they don't have body stores.
Right. So I want to go back to the muscle question. So what are, in terms of adding muscle, what do you recommend in terms of activities, or what do you eat? Do you have to sleep more? What are some lifestyle?
Yeah. So, I have what we call the Brandeis MD physical rejuvenation protocol. It's a 12-step protocol, and I can run through it pretty quickly. So first of all, you have to get a decent level of testosterone, right? If you have a testosterone of 200, I don't care how many times you're going to the gym, you're not going to build muscle.
Wow.
So you need, yeah, I mean, it's true.
Huh.
It's really sad. I have prostate cancer patients, and they go on what's called androgen deprivation therapy, right? So metastatic prostate cancer is a testosterone sensitive cancer. And so one of the treatments is to medically castrate people. And, I had a friend of mine who's one of my patients. In I think 9 months, he put on 14 pounds of fat and took off like 3-4 pounds of muscle, right? Because he was medically castrated.
Wow.
Right. I mean, dramatic, really just horrible. Right. And so, you have to have a decent level of testosterone. Otherwise, you can't build muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Second of all, if you want to build muscle, you need a high protein diet. Right. You can't build muscle out of starch, sugar. Right. So you need protein. And, most of us need 80, 100, 120 grams of protein a day. And protein is really, really hard to change into fat, right? So a tree turns carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen into sugar, and sugars turn into fat, which is carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. But proteins have this thing called nitrogen in there. And it's really hard for your body to take the nitrogen out and turn a protein into fat.
Mm.
That's why you can pretty much eat protein with impunity and not get fat,
Hmm.
right? But carbs is a whole different story. So you need protein to build muscle. You need a nitric oxide booster like my supplement Affirm, right? Because that boosts circulation. You lose nitric oxide as you age.
Hey,
And that's why,
what are the best protein sources? Just really quick.
to be perfectly honest, I'm not an expert in diet.
Okay.
So you can get it from plant-based protein, you can get it from animal-based protein. And at the end of the day, it all breaks down to amino acids anyway.
Mm.
So whether you get it from a plant source or an animal source, they're like, I don't know, 20 amino acids, and all those proteins are made of the amino acids.
Mm.
So you can take amino acids directly, you can take protein powders, you can take meat, you can take fish. A lot of it depends on what comes along with the protein.
Okay. Cool. Sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, no worries. Hydration,
Mm.
right? So everyone's like, drink this many cups of water a day, right? Just take a look at your urine. If it's a light straw yellow color, you're doing great. If it's clear, you're making your kidneys work too hard. And if it's dark yellow, you're dehydrated, right? Creatine, right? The purpose of creatine is to regenerate ATP. ATP is the source of energy in our body, right? And the energy is carried in the bond between the adenosine and the phosphate, right? So when the adenosine releases a phosphate, the energy comes off the molecule, but creatine basically takes the phosphate and sticks it back on the ADP. And so you don't need it if you're just sitting around, but if you're exercising, take some creatine before, take some creatine after. And then in terms of exercise, I recommend what I call ABC, right? A is ambulate, so walk, run, stairmaster, elliptical, anything where you're on your feet. B is for bike, and then C is for circuit training. So grab a 6 or 8 or 10 different exercises, and then just create a routine where you cycle through those for 40 or 45 minutes, right? And that, any of these things can be substituted for rowing or for swimming or for some other aerobic form of exercise. But I think the key is that as you age, it takes longer to recover.
Mm-hmm.
So you need 2 days to recover, because the thing is, if you're like all those people that bought those Peloton bikes during the pandemic and were just riding them like crazy every single day, they got a level of cardiovascular fitness, but they didn't really build muscle because every day they were tearing muscle down and they never gave their body a chance to rebuild the muscle, right? You need a nitric oxide booster, creatine, protein, sleep. So it's important to get enough sleep to rebuild the muscle. So when you're stressing the muscle, you need 2 days for it to recover. And then I tell every one of my patients to wake up in the morning, do 15 minutes of yoga or some sort of flexibility and some a little bit of meditation.
Got it. Well, that was an awesome answer. Thank you. So I'm realizing we're probably going to have to do a follow-up episode to do all of my other questions. So I'm going to try and wrap up what we've discussed so far. But one question that I'm thinking of, so I have 2 questions that I want to ask. The first is, and this is just going to be probably you giving like a random guess, your best guesstimate. How much of this has to do with lifestyle versus supplements and treatment?
In terms of like how much of overall physical health or sexual health, or
let's just say in terms of overall physical health, how much of this has to do with with nutrition, with exercise, with stress management, with having healthy relationships, with sleeping well, with eating well, versus doing all the supplementation, or if this would be testosterone therapy, or like all these other interventions?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably a third, a third, a third. So a third of it is genetics. I mean, there are people out there that are just like, I don't want to call them freaks of nature, but they're just blessed with with a better physical plant than you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And then a third of it is sort of testosterone and supplements and medications and so on and so forth. And a third of it is just sort of what your motivation and drive is to do better.
Cool. I like that answer. And then my second question is, I think the big reason, and this is why I'm like kind of apprehensive about testosterone therapy, is right. Everyone hears that, or at least, I don't know much about this. So, but one thing that I hear and that I'm afraid of is like, well, if you start it, you have to keep doing it forever. Is that true, or is that something that we should talk about?
Yeah. So I'll say two things. One, there's a great chapter in the 21st Century Man book written by Gary Donovitz, who was the founder of BioT, the largest testosterone company in the country. The other thing is, if you go to my website, brandeismd.com, and then go to the media tab and drop down to ebooks, I have 3 really, really good ebooks that are totally free. One is about testosterone. So that's just like a regular testosterone thing. Then the second one is testosterone levels.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because there's about 10 different ways to replace testosterone, and they all have pros and cons. And one of the pros and cons is the different levels that you'll reach. So, for example, if you want high levels, pellets or shots. If you want low to intermediate levels, then creams or subcutaneous, so on and so forth. So it really makes a big difference. And very few people actually really understand the levels that they're getting. They think that all testosterone replacement is equal, but it's definitely not. So read the levels book. And then the third book is a performance enhancing drug book. So I get a lot of bodybuilders or people that have used sort of bodybuilding drugs and really messed themselves up, right? There's just this huge lack of information. And I think a lot of it's because the medical community hasn't really gotten involved in testosterone therapy, because nobody wants to be the doctor that goes to jail for jacking up Lance Armstrong or Barry Bonds. And so, doctors tend to shy away from that. And so I said, well, this is not right. I have a lot of these guys that are, on SWAT teams and police and fire. And if you're a SWAT guy and your testosterone's 400 and you're chasing criminals whose testosterones are 1,000 that are jacked up on methamphetamines, that's actually life-threatening, right? It's an occupational hazard. I mean, it's one thing if you're a football player and it's a $5 million contract that you're trying to get, but it's another thing if people are shooting at you, or you got to jump fences to catch bad guys. And so, I decided to really delve into understanding testosterone replacement therapy and testosterone derivatives like DHT derivatives and 19-NORs and all of the medications that go along with that. And so there's a performance enhancing drug book that goes along with that that's really good. So that's a long answer to the answer I'm going to give you now, which is, if you do things intelligently and from a knowledge base and work with a physician that actually understands this stuff, you can do it very safely. So there's the hypothalamus pituitary testicular axis, right? So the hypothalamus produces GnRH, which tells the testicle to produce LH and FSH. FSH tells the testicle to make sperm, and LH tells the testicle to make testosterone. And then there's this negative feedback loop from the testicle making testosterone back to the pituitary and to the brain. So if you're just taking pure testosterone, it's going to shut down the production of LH and FSH, which is going to tell your testicle, listen, guys, you've been laid off, right? You don't have to make testosterone anymore, and you also don't have to make sperm. So your testicle is going to shrink. And if you ever needed to stop testosterone for any reason, like you ran out of money or whatever, you're screwed. I had a patient who was this Raider player for like 15 years, all pro. I did his vasectomy, and his testicles were the size of peas, right? Because he didn't have a doctor that actually understood. But there are medications like selective estrogen, like what we call SERMs, like called Clomid or clomiphene, that block the negative feedback loop, or For my patients who want fertility, you can do what's called beta HCG, which is very similar to LH and FSH. So sort of the medium sized answer to your question is, if you do it intelligently with knowledge, with a doctor who can prescribe properly, it can be done and maintain fertility and maintain testicular function.
Now I have a bunch of other questions. Uh, so I wrote one question that I really wanted to answer, that I really wanted to get answered, and then I'll go into my quick questions.
Sure.
But does frequent orgasm help with overall health? And if so, how frequent should it be?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, physical intimacy and orgasm, I think, is good in a lot of ways. You know, especially if it involves an intimate connection with a partner. So, you know, it's good for emotional health.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for prostate health. You know, it's good exercise, and so. But in terms of frequency of ejaculation, you know, honestly, I don't know that there's ever been a study done to look at physical, emotional health. But you know what? I'm going to the Sexual Medicine Society meeting.
Mm-hmm.
There's the joint meeting of the International Society of Sexual Medicine and the Sexual Medicine Society of North America. So if anyone can answer that question, that person is going to be at that meeting. So I'll try to ask that question for you and see if I can come up with an answer.
And if you do find that person, I would love to know what they call themselves an expert in.
Sure.
Because I'm sure it's a wonderfully medical term
Yeah.
that really just translates to how frequent do you orgasm. So I'm excited to hear that. All right, so the next part, and this is the quick part of the conversation, but these are questions that I ask all of our guests, and these have to do with your experience in terms of your own life, but also in terms of your expertise. So the first question is, what do you think is one habit, a belief, or a mindset that has helped you the most in terms of your overall happiness?
Oh gosh. I think sort of be kind to people.
Okay. That was quick. Yeah, that's a good one. What is one thing that you do for your health that you think is overlooked or undervalued by others?
I think a nitric oxide booster is tremendously overlooked. You know, I had a patient who he had borderline high blood pressure, and I'm not a big fan of blood pressure medications if you don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was being seen by a Stanford cardiologist, and he was a CEO of a tech company. And so he was tracking his blood pressure, you know, on his iPhone. He was showing me all his apps and stuff like that. And I said, you know, I want you to go on 2 tablets of Affirm in the morning and 2 tablets of Affirm in the evening and start, you know, my lifestyle program, exercise more, eat better. And he came back 2 weeks later, his blood pressure was 118 over something.
Mm-hmm.
And he said his Stanford cardiologist couldn't believe that he had turned things around so quickly. But nitric oxide, when I was at UCLA, it was the mechanism of action was discovered by one of my professors who won the Nobel Prize, and it's really a supplement that has no negative side effects and will benefit athletes, will benefit blood pressure, will benefit cognition because it boosts brain blood flow, and it benefits people sexually.
Wow. Okay, I'm intrigued. Checking out nitric oxide. So, what's the most important activity you regularly do for your overall, I call it stress management. It also could be considered your mental well-being or your emotional well-being?
Yeah, I do 15 minutes of yoga before anyone else wakes up in the morning in my house, and I exercise, or I try to exercise every day. I mean, I can't function without those 2 things.
Yeah, I hear that. What's the most stressful part of your day-to-day life?
Managing a wife and 4 kids and the intimate relationships and the ebbs and flows of those kind of things.
Yeah, I hear that.
You know, as a physician, there's a dynamic between a doctor and a patient. You know, patients come in, they pay money to listen to me and to hear all the smart stuff that I have to say to them and look at my diplomas up on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you're in a intimate relationship, it's a much more level playing field. And
Yeah.
that's a much trickier thing to manage.
I'm smiling because my dad is an oncologist at the Cleveland Clinic, and
Oh, wow.
so yeah, he's always right, right? He's the doctor. So,
Yeah.
having level conversations can, can be difficult. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. My last question, and this I think is the big question: what do you think is the biggest challenge facing men and their well-being right now?
I think for American men, it's expectations.
Mm,
It's our economy is contracting. The way that we live is changing. Um, it's 100 years ago, men lived 1 year less than women. Now men live 5 years less than women. And mortality for men in the United States is going up even before COVID because of alcohol, opioids, and suicide.
mm-hmm.
And so this is, I think, the number one challenge is setting our expectations properly and trying to figure out how to manage stress.
So I want to dig into that a little bit more. But do you think that when you say managing expectations, are you talking about men's success levels in terms of their professional lives, or just in terms of, and then not being able to attain what they think they should be attaining and just being emotionally stressed over that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think social media, everyone posts, all these wonderful pictures of vacations or
Mm,
their hot girlfriend or their fancy car or, what life is supposed to be. And, life isn't that way.
mm,
Life is messy. Life is hard. I see athletes and CEOs and very, very successful people as patients, and everyone's got problems. And when people realize, okay, everyone else has problems, let me just deal with my problems.
mm-hmm.
There's a really important chapter in the book called The Hero's Journey, which tries to tell men, like, just focus on your own problems. Like, look at Tom Brady, right? 2 years ago, everyone's like, oh man, that guy's on top of the world. He's got 7 Super Bowl rings and he's got the hottest wife in the world that makes hundreds of millions of dollars. But damn, that guy's life is a mess. Or Brad Pitt, right? He's got the hottest girlfriends. He's in all these movies, Pirates of Caribbean, whatever. I mean, I felt bad for him, but in some ways I took a little bit of solace of listening to the stuff in the courtroom, because I'm like, man, my life's hard, but that guy's life is really messed up.
Yeah.
So just focus on who you are, your own problems, and live your own hero's journey. And don't worry about what the next guy's doing, because he's going to hide his pain from you.
Mm,
Focus on your own pain.
yeah. Well, that was an awesome conversation. I can honestly say that I was not expecting to be that great. I don't know, and I mean that in
Well, I came in with low expectations. See, that's the key.
exactly. I managed my expectations. Um, no, that was amazing. That was informational. I think you did an awesome job making it understandable to someone like me who doesn't have a medical degree. And I hope you'll come back on for a repeat show. But in the meantime, I am going to go dig into your website a little bit more. Once I finally unpack my boxes from moving a few months ago and find all my books again, I want to get into the 21st century man and read that and dig into that a little bit more. Can you just remind us how we can go learn more about you and find more of what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brandeis MD is my website, BRANDEISMD.com. And then the book is the 21stcenturyman.com. So if you just go write it out all in letters, the 21stcenturyman.com, you'll get to the book. And it's a beast of a book. It's over 900 pages,
Mm-hmm.
101 chapters. You had 2 incredible chapters, one on yoga and one on mindfulness. And it really encompasses everything that a 40-plus-year-old man will need to understand. And it's written not just by me, but 60 other really top flight professionals in men's health, whether they're physicians or experts in their own little niches. And so each chapter is sort of bite size, but it's not see spot run. It's written for someone who's reasonably intelligent that really wants to learn what they need to know about how to take care of themselves.
And I'm assuming we should read this book like the Bible. We should jump around to where we need to go, not read start to finish.
Exactly. And then my supplement company is affirmscience.com, and we have supplements for nitric oxide boosting, for testosterone, for premature ejaculation, and for prostate health. And then I have a YouTube channel. I have an Instagram. I'm kind of all over the place.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Dr. Brandeis, thanks so much for joining me on the Better Man podcast. It was truly an inspiring episode. I look forward to having you back.
Awesome. Hey, thanks a lot, Dean. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate what you do. I mean, I think yoga, I recommend it to every one of my patients. Honestly, I have on my little Brandeis MD male rejuvenation protocol sheet, I have your website out, and I recommend everyone go there and figure out some sort of stretching and yoga routine to do every single day to kind of get the blood flow going and create flexibility.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, guys. I hope this episode inspires you to be a better man, and I look forward to having you back on, or coming back on and listening to more. If you like that episode, check out this other one right here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, click this subscribe button over here, and you can listen to the full episodes on any major podcasting platform. Full details below in the description.